Automation with Arista CloudVision webinar, where you're glad you could join us this morning or evening or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Eden, and I'm on the marketing team here at Sunset Learning. And with me, I have Terry, who is the global head of training at Arista, and Rich, who is the training infrastructure manager. These two are going to give you an overview of how CloudVision features are being deployed to customers today. The session will also include live demos configuring these different capabilities at the end. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Please use the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen for questions for our presenters, and then the chat window for general comments. This just helps us make sure that every question gets answered. This session is also being recorded, and the recording will be sent to you later this week. And now I'll hand it over to the Arista team to get started.
All right, good morning, everybody. As Eden said, I'm Terry Jenkins, the global head of training across Arista. What we wanted to do in one of our partnerships here with Sunset, one of our strategic training partners across the board, is kind of dig into some topics that a lot of people may not have had a lot of exposure to, or you may have preconceptions about, and just kind of dig in a little bit. So a couple of the things that we're going to talk about today is specific in CloudVision. It's a key product within the Arista portfolio. I have some assumptions of what you think the preconceptions are. What does CloudVision do? So we're going to kind of go over a little bit of one aspect of CloudVision and what CloudVision can bring to the table. And this is typically a topic we hear a lot in the classroom as far as engineers trying to embrace automation and how to bring that into your networks and how to leverage that to drive your networks forward. This is probably something that most people don't necessarily associate with CloudVision the first time they hear it. You may assume it's a network management platform. So as we're walking through this, I want to kind of highlight that focus, and then we're probably going to run a series of these where we can kind of dig in a little less known products and a little less known features that are very, very important to what we see most of our customers asking for when we're going in to do training. So I've asked Lavanya to come in. Lavanya owns the product. She can talk to the product quite well. She can give you the ins and outs. She's going to do a little bit of a kind of a demo walkthrough on it. And then I have Rich off of my team, which heads up all of our lab infrastructure and our builds and all the automation that we do in the back end to bring the classes to the market. And hopefully we can leave you guys with a little bit of a takeaway so you can go and play with this afterwards. So I would kind of kick this off with saying, what is CloudVision at Arista? Most people do assume it's a network management platform. Does it do network management? Absolutely. Can we help with the standard stuff that you've always seen in network management platforms throughout your career? Of course. But that's not all it does. That's one thing it does. Second to that is, sure, we can get you telemetry data. Telemetry data is very, very important. It adds in that proactive kind of scenario with CloudVision, where we can start to say, hey, we're watching a trend in your link utilization, and the platform is going to come back and say that you're going to reach what you're setting as a threshold in roughly this amount of time. So certainly we have a whole set of telemetry stuff that goes into CloudVision. Can we manage code management? So your upgrades and your downgrades, and how do you do that with your actual EOS versions on your switches? All of that's covered in CloudVision. Can we manage your configs? Here in the config management, we've done a few things a little different because we've kind of built a platform from ground up to actually be a network automation platform. So very often, if you were to catch me on the street and ask me what CloudVision does, you would probably get the description from me that it's like network operations in a box, or network automation in a box. It is a platform designed around network operating teams. We took a lot of feedback and input from our customers from that side. If it's telemetry, do we capture every single thing? Do you need to know what the network was doing Tuesday night at 2 o'clock with a full moon? That's probably less important to you than some critical events. So we've presented it in such a way that things are very, very relevant to that network operations team. We've done the same thing with configs. So in history, where we've gone as an industry, we've all probably been around environments where we're going to sit down, we're going to build a network topology in Visio, we're going to come up with our configs, we decide on our protocols, our parameters, our features. We sit over here and we type that out in a notepad. We try to duplicate that notepad file, copy, paste. We go back and change IP addresses. We change device names. We do things like that to make it generic, very manual process. And then we go out to the switches and we literally copy and paste these configs in. The problem with that is you're managing the switch as an entire config. How many times do you have to change the AAA config? How many times do you have to change the NTP config? Are these configs exactly the same on every box in the network? So we took the approach early on with CloudVision that we introduced the concept of what we call a configlet. It's a small portion of a config. Now you can only change the NTP config when you need to change the NTP config. So we've designed a platform to have this fundamental functionality underneath where we can split the configurations down into functional pieces and manage those pieces. Later, we went in and we've added some places to do automation. So really the story we're going to kind of tell today is how can you leverage CloudVision in your Arista environment to kind of meet you where you are today in that automation landscape. We have some customers that just doing this concept of Configlets is actually going to be quite a step in the movement of automation compared to the manual cut and paste process I just talked about. We have some others that have a couple of people on staff, they know some Python. So now we can go in and help you do what we call a configlet builder, where we're going to take these little configlets, add in some Python scripting in the back end of CloudVision, and now we can automate some things where the BGP config is the same on 200 devices, but each device has got their own router ID. So that little bit of Python script can create that configlet for all 200 devices, but also keep the uniqueness that you need across those devices with the Python script. We go beyond that to what we're going to spend a lot of time on today, which is studios, which are in some ways kind of pre-packaged templates. But we don't hold you to absolutely having to use those templates as they are. You have a bit of customization you can do with that. So you can kind of take that as far as you want to go. Behind that scenes, the next level of complexity is work we've done with Ansible and our Ansible Arista Validated Designs, what we call AVD. These are pre-work done between Arista and Ansible to have EVPN scripts ready to go, playbooks that you can roll out EVPN, and we've already kind of helped build some of the functionality that you need in with that. So that's another step deeper. And then we've got customers where we go all the way to the far end of the spectrum where we're designing, customized CI/CD pipelines and workflows and things like this. And CloudVision is right in the middle of that process, as well as being integrated into other automation tools. So we have a wide landscape. And this is really gets into that where we meet you where you are concept that I'm discussing is you can adopt automation. Maybe you're a company that has 25 people on a dedicated DevOps team, and you could start charging at one area of the spectrum. You may be a company that has 5 network engineers in the whole company, and none of you know any automation scripts. We can still get you better than to copy and paste CLI and start moving you down that spectrum as you go. So want to kind of go over that, let you guys see this. As far as training goes, guys, we introduce CloudVision in every one of our ACE courses, from our very lowest level 1, kind of entry level into networking at ACE level 1, all the way to our ACE level 5 is all about network automation. We're going to teach very specific how to use some of these features and doing some of those more advanced capabilities. We have dedicated courses, 3-day course just on CloudVision. So you can come in and just learn the CloudVision aspect of it, where level 5, ACE level 5, for example, is also going to teach you, how to automate EVPN and do some other stuff like that. So you could come in and do the standalone CloudVision. And then kind of on our roadmap, we have some very specific courses that we're going to be introducing with some that we're building around Ansible AVD. We have some other partnerships coming in that we're going to bring in some more basic and more advanced kind of follow on and prerequisite type courses, Ansible and Python, stuff like this. So, excuse me, you will all see this kind of grow a lot over the next 6 months to a year as we're adding this in. So any of these courses you want to come back and do it, you'll be able to go through bits and pieces of this. So today what we're going to focus on is studios, this kind of middle of the ground. It's not quite all the way to the left and just doing configlets or copy and paste. It's not all the way to the right doing a CI/CD pipeline. Studios was designed to kind of fit right down the middle The assumption is probably teams that don't have a lot of automation experience on hand, but you're able to your end state is looking like you do. And this is kind of where studios can kind of come in and help with that. So I'm going to hand it over now to Lavanya, let her do whatever introduction she wants to do on herself. And she's going to kind of walk you guys through a little bit of the story of studios, maybe do some demos, and then Rich will come in behind that with showing you guys a little bit of what we do in a classroom with labs around some of this stuff. So Lavanya, have at it.
Great. Thanks, Terry. Good morning, afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. I'm happy to be here to talk about CloudVision Studios and even walk you through, where we are, how this has evolved even within the product from an automation perspective. So with that, let me get my screen sharing going. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about, Studios itself, how we've approached automation within Arista. Where does CloudVision come in all of this story? And what does Studios bring to the table for our customers? So if you look at the approach to network automation itself, like Terry was mentioning, you have pretty much a spectrum of what customers are doing. And it starts with, our big customers who have pretty much their own team to go and build a lot of these tools, and they have the whole do-it-yourself approach. They're just like, give us the data, give us the APIs or the SDKs, and we'll go and build it out ourselves. And in between, we have, customers who have an existing framework invested in the DevOps model, but be it using Ansible, the Salt Stack, and we kind of plug in each of these areas as well with EOS and CloudVision, and that very much goes in with the theme of how programmable, each of our products has always been. And CloudVision comes in for those customers who want to get on that automation journey, but have something a lot more turnkey that they can enable and, get there without having to invest a lot of resources in either building tools or, learning a lot of new skill sets itself. Right. And this can be, customers who are still using CLI as a day-to-day management tool and, to manage complex configurations. And where a lot of these things, break is when you have a larger scale and a lot more of config to manage, then you want to kind of step back and see how do you at a much bigger scale. So let's look at config management itself, right? And legacy model of managing config, which is still probably true for a lot of customers even today, is, the model itself is a flat file, and you do it on a per device basis, meaning let's say you want to set up a network, you go to each box, you use the CLI, that's your user interface, and you configure these features on a box by box basis. And this could be, either setting up a network from scratch or going and, incrementally adding devices or your day two configuration, software upgrades, pretty much everything. Your interface is your CLI. Right. And what we added with CloudVision and, we set up a baseline with CloudVision with Configlets. And this is, what Terry was referring to as well. And what we did with this was basically took a step back and say, how do you start looking at configuration at a network-wide level? What pieces of my configuration are applicable to more than one device, right? And how can I manage that so that when I go and make that change on one configlet, it percolates to all of the devices that need to get that change, right? And that's pretty much, if you think about it, that's what automation is about, making sure every change you make is consistent, it gets across to all the devices, and you have a way to verify it. So the scope itself went from per device to network-wide to basically allow you to manage configurations across the network. Now, even with Configlets, it was very similar to your CLI. Meaning what you type in your CLI is what you type in your Configlets, right? So the learning curve itself is not at all a lot. If you can configure all these commands in your CLI, you're very aware of how the protocol, the features, and all of that works. You take that and you put that in the config model becomes Configlets, and you start managing it. The user interface now shifts. Now you're not doing it at the CLI anymore, and now you're doing it at CloudVision, where you go and edit a file, and CloudVision automatically knows how many devices that piece of configuration is applied to, and it tells you, hey, you're making this change, and so you're going to be making this change on 20 devices. Do you want to go ahead, right? So you get a consistent way to replicate these changes across devices in your network. Now, as we started going into newer markets, one of the challenges we did see was how the operator level itself, varies. We talked about the whole automation spectrum, and then there is a whole skill set spectrum in terms of what type of operators are now involved in making changes to the network config, right? And so in order to address the various levels of operators, we brought in CloudVision Studios, which abstracts configuration another level by having a data model which doesn't need the end user to worry about knowing the CLI syntax, right? I need to configure NTP. All I need to know is the NTP server, and how to get to it and make sure the switch can get to it, and not worry about what that CLI syntax underneath needs to be. And that's what CloudVision aims to achieve at a very simple level. And this can be further, extended to, how do I stand up a layer 3 leaf spine network? How do I stand up a campus network? How do I add switches to my existing network? And simplifying that. As we keep adding more and more of, these layers of protocols, sometimes the configuration complexity increases, and, also becomes time consuming to go and configure and manage these devices. And so CloudVision brings in these built-in templates that can help simplify config management across the network. So the scope is still network-wide, and that doesn't change from a CloudVision perspective. But what does change is the data model and how we store the config, as well as the workflow itself. And you will see this, very clearly within the demo that we'll look into. So it's very templatized. You will be looking at just, forms that you have to drag and drop and enter in values, and CloudVision takes care of building out the whole configuration syntax and validating that configuration for your end device as well. So here's a quick screenshot to kind of give you an idea, but what is, Studios to kind of define it. You have point and click network automation. And these, again, are tied in with a lot of the network designs that are validated by Arista, the field folks in Arista. And so you get our standard designs that are recommended to customers, whether that's a data center or a campus, and provisioning services. We have a number of built-in workflows that you can leverage. These are still flexible. So by saying you can deploy a leaf spine network, the user is not locked into what we think you should deploy. I think extensibility is kind of a key part of all of the products we ship, and it very much goes with Studios as well. You see that one of the knobs or the timers that we are using by default doesn't work for you, or you need an additional command to, be more compliant with the configuration you have. You can go and edit any of these Studios to add that field, to modify, a given default, and, fine tune it to the needs of your network, right? And so you still have that flexibility. Having these network-wide data models itself, I think, brings in a new level of abstraction. So you don't have to go and worry about, what files do I manage, which file is on which device. It simplifies all of that for the end user, and makes automation that much more easier. So we've traditionally seen a lot of network management configuration, wizards that, step you through the configuration as well. And Studios, a lot of the built-in workflows within Studios are meant to guide the user, to design their network and generate the configuration for them. But again, like I said, there is a lot of flexibility to tune each of these parameters and how you would use them to tailor it to fit your network and the business needs for the network itself. So the neat thing is pretty much, any EOS CLI command you have, you can run that through Studios. We, at the end of the day, use the APIs. There are APIs available for Studios as well, but the whole focus itself is to make CloudVision a multi-domain platform that can extend across various network use cases, be it data center, campus, edge routing, we are working on building studios for each of these use cases, and you'll see some of these in action soon as well. All right, so with that said, let's quickly jump in to the demos. So we were talking a lot about Configlets, and so I thought we'd start there in introducing what, the baseline we had set with CloudVision. And this is still, a good, is a part of the product itself. So what is a Configlet? So this is what a Configlet looks like. It's pretty much a flat file that has all the commands that you would otherwise type in your CLI. Now, the way Configlet management works itself is you can see that I have a global management for my lab here, and this takes care of pretty much all the common parameters or features that you would configure that don't change as much across all of these devices. And examples here are, routing protocols, your name server, domain, spanning tree, etc., default route, and so on. So the nice thing about this is you can see that it's applied to many devices here. So for example, 6 devices here. And anytime I go and make a change to this Configlet itself, what will happen is that it'll tell me that this configuration is there on 6 devices. And so do you want to go and consistently make that change across all the devices, right? So you can see that it already knows. So you have a way to consistently replicate, any config changes across all devices. So think about use cases like, adding TACACS servers or rotating any keys for TACACS, changing your syslog server, adding a new one. So these are typical things that are common across many switches. And once you go and make an edit in one of these files, it automatically goes and creates that change across all devices that already have this configuration. This is very easily applicable even to, images, hotfixes, and so on, where it uses the same model of keeping track of what is applied on how many devices, right? And so it makes it very easy for you to replicate these changes. So a couple of other things, we talked about some of the configurations. So if you think about a typical leaf and a spine network, leaf switches have, in this case, an MLAC configuration. So this is specific to MLAC. So it has all of the configurations, port channel, what's my peer link, and, the specifics of, MLAG itself. And similarly, you can break this up into routing. So the whole idea of breaking up your entire switch config into chunks of config is so that you can decide what pieces are common, what are more specific, and you go and edit only, that configlet that you want to make the change or the feature that you want to change, and you don't have to go and touch the entire running config, and basically avoids, a lot of human errors in terms of what other things that might get changed and cause issues while executing the change itself. So again, for example, this is used for routing. So you have your basic loopback, which are my routed ports, and my BGP configuration, peering, and the route maps, and so on. So these are a couple of examples of how you would use, static configuration, very straightforward, same thing that you would use in your CLI. You just throw it into a configlet and you start managing it from, CloudVision. The neat thing about CloudVision is, going back to the point where Terry said, we meet you where you are. A lot of times, automation, it's not a switch that you flip, the next day you're automated. Yes, we got this tool, now we are automated. It's a journey, and, you start off someplace, and the nice thing about Configlets is that it gives you that familiarity, right? You know the CLI, you've seen what it is, and it's the same thing. Your interface changes and where you manage it from changes. So it allows you to take that first baby step into saying, okay, I can move away from the CLI and I can start doing things here, and this still looks familiar to me and I can continue to do it, right? And with CloudVision's telemetry, it gives you that assurance that every change you're making, every state change that is streamed, you can see all of that. And so as you start, using the product more, you're looking at configuration, telemetry, and you start getting a lot more familiar. And then you get to a point where, you're able to completely run all the changes from CloudVision. Now, let's say you started using CloudVision you're using these configlets and you go and make a change directly on the switch itself, right? And it's not that you cannot do that. We don't lock out the CLI or anything. You still have access to all those ways that you are used to using, making changes. You can go make a change in the CLI, and then you can decide if you want to absorb that into CloudVision, or you want to override it from CloudVision. That's an option too. So there is a lot of room for users to use CloudVision and kind of go on this journey, and until the point they are completely adjusted to the automation workflow. One of the other things that Terry talked about was looking at a Python script and automating it. This is something you might see in the courses as well, but here you still, we have some example scripts that come, but you build a Python script to take in some inputs, and then, it'll basically generate the configuration for you. And let's look at this here. For example, I have a VXLAN builder here. So if you want to just automate how the VXLAN VNI mapping is generated, you build in a form, and you can see that it quickly pretty much generates the entire configuration for you, right? And these are all, one of the key things with automation itself is saving time, right? And that's exactly what the goal of bringing in these programmable aspects of the product is. You can build out these cookie cutter templates and go and have it generate the configuration. But taking this one step further, what does Studios bring, right? So let's go take a look. So with Studios, we've basically built a lot of these templates that we have. So you can see there's a campus fabric, there's a layer 3 leaf spine, EVP and services. So these are broadly defined, there are standard ways of how these are done when you go and implement a network design. So they capture all of the rules and, how leaves and spines should be configured, typical, what are the protocols, and all of that is captured within the studio. So let's quickly, take a look at some of these studios, right? Very simple things. How do you go configure date and time? Setting up an NTP server, right? These are all, you can see that the big difference between Configlets and Studios is the fact that you don't see a single line of configuration anywhere in the interface here. And that's the whole goal, is to abstract that from the end user and just, capture things like what the values are, and then have CloudVision generate the configuration for you. It's not like you'll never get to see the config. You do get to see the configuration, you get to validate it, you get to approve it, but at least at the point that you're designing and setting up devices, you don't have to worry about what the syntax is it right, and so on. Neat use cases for these, again, are, a lot of times you have teams where, server teams where you want to set up servers, and at some point you want to set up a self-serve model for some basic configurations that users can go and provision themselves, right? And they don't have to be a network engineer to do that. And one of the goals with Studios is that too, where you can create these profiles. For example, I have, a campus workstation profile here, which tells me what the description is, what speed, what mode, what VLANs should be allowed. Now, if I have these profiles created in advance, then all I have to go tell my person provisioning the campus workstation is, hey, go to the device and pull up the interface and just assign your profile to that interface, right? And so that makes it a lot more easier to create these self-serve models rather than have everything come onto the network team for configuration. So for example, I just say, enter campus workstation here, and then it goes and provisions the port itself. So that's another way to think about, where Studios comes in and the benefits of it itself. So beyond that, you can use Studios right from the get-go. You want to set up a network, a standard, leaf spine, campus fabric, or you want to just do day 2 operations like, provision services, manage interfaces, then that's something you can do as well. So let's take a look at, the fabric itself. We looked in the Configlets piece, if you remember, we looked at, the switches, and we looked at a leaf switch and saw that it had those various elements of, the basic configuration. There was an MLAC piece, there was a routing piece, and you saw all the CLI commands associated within the Configlet itself. But let's take a look at what this looks like in Studios and how it tries to simplify it further, right? So I have a layer 3 leaf spine studio here, and I want to add 2 leaves to it, right? And so what are the steps that I have to do? So once the devices are within CloudVision itself, it's pretty much, checking the boxes here. And you can see that the devices get added, and I have to, tell CloudVision, hey, these are leaves. So let's go and assign that. And once this is pretty much done, CloudVision knows what spines it's connecting to, what leaves are already there. It automatically goes and pre-populates a lot of this. You can see, the MLAG configuration is already here. It asks you for a starting point. These are the things you can fine tune these, the subnets, similarly for BGP. And once all of this is set and you're incrementally adding to a network, it's pretty much that. You add these 2 devices and it'll start building the configuration for you. So that's one of the neat things with Studios itself, is it takes it one step further, where you don't have to put in the work to actually go and configure all of these features, right? You just know what your network design elements are, what subnets you can work with, and those pieces of it. And then it does, the hard work of actually going and generating all of this configuration. So you can see very well here that this looks very similar to what we saw in the Configlets, except I didn't have to type even a single line of configuration here, right? And so the peering VLAN, all the port channels, pretty much all of that, including even the routing piece, is all generated by CloudVision itself, right? And this is based on standard designs. So there are ways to go and, fine tune all of the variables we use here, but, you still don't have to worry about what is, do I have to configure BGP? How do I do that? What do I do if I need VXLAN configuration as well? And it pretty much takes care of everything, the descriptions and all of that too. So not just that, right? I mean, we looked about the leaf. So anytime you connect up a leaf, you have to connect to the spine as well. So it goes and configures the spine devices as well, saying, hey, you've got 2 new ports, and these are the configurations you need as a result of adding the leaves. So if I basically, minimize this, I want to show you in those 2 clicks, that I added and used, we basically generated 107 lines per device on the leaf and about 34 lines of new configuration on the spine devices, right? And so one of the things I want you to think about is the time saving, right? Of how much time was saved in taking away the complexity of going and individually configuring each of these features and thinking about how it needs to scale as you add capacity to your network, or even you stand up that network, right? And so the time you basically save in doing these configurations, you can put somewhere else in making the network more better, or spending more time on things that need your attention. So again, we've been taking it one step further in fulfilling, customers' requirements in that automation journey. And I think Studios really helps in taking away the complexity and adding like self-serve models that people can go and, configure themselves without being a network engineer, without knowing CLI syntax. And it makes it a lot more simpler for customers as well. The neat thing is, again, once you have all of this configuration generated and compiled, it validates it against the device. What does validation mean? Make sure there are no syntax errors, right? Anything that the CLI throws, you are overriding some config, or there's some overlap, it'll automatically alert you, and you know that, and you get those errors here as well. So once you do this, you can submit all of the changes, and what it does is it creates a change control. The change control is, again, a neat way of, rolling changes out to the end devices. And the good thing about change control itself is it allows you to decide how you want these changes rolled out. Is it going to be in series? Is it going to be in parallel? Do I want to do one device first and then the rest? And so you can select pretty much the order. You can even have a template. I like to use the example of templates largely for, network upgrades, because there's always a rinse and repeat procedure that's used in network upgrades. And so putting that into a template so that you can call it every time. Again, another example of how you can create things that can be reused again and again. I think that's one of the key aspects of automation. And, Studios combined with change control helps you get to that goal, right? And so with this as well, you have always a review process. So you always get to review what you're, pushing out to the network. We had 107 lines, so making sure all of that is there, and you can either execute it immediately or you can approve it. You can have role separation into who can be an approver, who cannot. And these are things that are more done, to streamline automation. Like a lot of customers use ServiceNow. How do you offload the approval to a tool like ServiceNow so that these changes are not executable until you come in, until the approval is in place, right? So tying into those ITSM tools that are already established in doing these change management workflows. So CloudVision ties into all of these workflows that are already there. You can, track who was the last editor, who was the approver. You can even schedule to run this change at a specific time. So in addition to Studios, change control gives you a lot more flexibility on, okay, you generated all of this configuration. You can decide how you want to roll this out to your end devices. And, this is not just for configuration. This is for upgrades and so on. So let's execute this change. And, and while this is executing the change itself, we can take a look at some of the aspects of, topology. You can see that these were the two leaf devices that were connected and we deployed. And you will soon see that, the VLANs are added as well. So let's look at some of the VLANs here. Once the changes are deployed, you can see that, the change control is running on these boxes. It'll automatically tell you here in events that a change has been started. Oops. Let me go back here. But once you see that, you will see that these were, the VXLAN tunnels that were created, and these will now get, first, these two switches will get provisioned, and you will get to see that they are an MLAG pair, and we can use the EVPN services to even extend these VNIs to these new devices as well. So again, getting that assurance of what you're doing, all the changes that you're rolling out, how that's being affected, and so on. So you will get to see that in topology view as well. Another great aspect of this is looking, at all of these metrics using dashboards. How is my network looking? I deployed MLAG. So you can see here quickly that, we added MLAG here. 3A and 3B are there. The state of MLAG is ready. And, primary is 3B and secondary is 3A. So again, this is just verification of, I pushed in all of this configuration. What is the state? How do I verify this, right? So you can see that the peering is set up here as well for 3A and 3B. And these were all new devices. So you can quickly take a look at all of these aspects using the telemetry. And it kind of closes that whole feedback loop that you need for automation, because anytime you use a tool, you're stepping away from the CLI, you need to have that, assurance that the changes you pushed have been executed successfully, and and that reflects in the state of the network as well. And I think the other telemetry aspects of it in terms of dashboards and topology view aim to exactly give you that visibility to tell you that you have successfully made the changes that you were looking to execute. So with that, I'll take a pause and see if there are any questions.
Don't see any in the Q&A or chat.
All right. I mean, Terry, Rich, I know Rich had some, items planned as well, but,
Yeah, that's perfect, Lavanya. So one thing I will add in with you guys, one of the things when I came into Arista 4 years ago and saw this product and looked at it, I've got a career in other vendors for, 20 years, and I'm looking at this going, is this another network management platform? Where does it fit? Why would I use it? What's it about? I'm asking all the same questions that a lot of you may be asking. One of the great benefits about everything that Lavanya just said is, one, you don't have to buy CloudVision. We don't force it down your throat. Comparatively speaking, I like that approach a lot more than I've seen in other places, where there's some of the templates that make my life easy, but I don't like being locked in a template because there's something unique I want to do. And if the platform doesn't let me tweak the template or it doesn't let me bypass the template, then it actually hurts my architecture and what I'm trying to do in my place. I love the fact that, one, we don't push you to buy the platform. We tend to see most of our large scale customers readily adapt this because we don't have to convince them too much about what the savings and time is. This has never been, and a lot of people have that misconception that automation automates you out of a job. What we see is actually the opposite. We see a lot of our customers take on a lot more project load throughout the year. They're able to get more things done, things that have been put in a hopper, or a project that may take 2 years is now taking a year. So we see them asking for this kind of platform. Now, when you go and set this up, a lot of stuff that Lavanya's went over, it's there. Some of it's there with our guidelines, and we can help you do that. So it's really important to let you guys know that you're not stuck out by yourself. Rich is going to kind of start to show you what we do from the training side to teach you how to do these things. If you're in a rush and you kind of got to get this done, you're deploying the equipment in 2 months, and the learning process may take you 6 or 8 months to get your team confident. We have our EOS Plus services team that can kind of come and help with integrations, help you get some of this set up. We have a PS team that can come in and help you turn it up. Even our SCs are pretty well versed in this stuff, that they can even kind of help you guys get this started. So you're not left alone. We're not forcing you down a path, and yet we're not leaving you alone to figure it out by yourself either. So just know that kind of completes the picture as you go through. But now I'd like Rich to just take a few minutes, kind of go through a little bit of what we do on the training side, from how we would teach you how to do studios. And then we'll let you guys go and send you a link, and you can kind of play with it on your own.
Hey everyone, great to have you all here. So as Terry said, we concentrate on studios throughout the entire training program. So whether you're coming in on level 1, whether you're coming in on level 2, or whether you're more advanced and you come in at level 3 through 5, you'll touch studios at some point within those classes. And at first we hold your hand, we walk you through how things happen, how you can go about using your configlets, and how you can start moving your static network into studios, as Lavanya showed you, by breaking up your larger running configs into smaller sections that can be used within Configlets and then reused and starting your automation journey. As you go up through the levels of the training class, when we start bringing in concepts such as configlet builders and studios, and we have an entire CVP class, and we walk you through using studios from that very first moment where you onboard your devices into the Studios platform, where you start with the basic configurations of your interfaces, all the way up to how you go about configuring a spine leaf with EVPN, with using Studios for the entire workflow of that. On top of that, we show you how to expand your studios. We show you how to take a studio that exists and make modifications to it, as well as starting to use studios from scratch and build out the studios that you need within your environment. And again, like Lavanya said, there's no reason why you can't mix and match any of this. You can keep the majority of your configuration within Configlets and configlet builders, and you can move over some of the configuration into studios. And as you become more adept and as you become more skilled and more knowledgeable about it, then you can start moving other aspects as well. And if you go on the programmability classes, then we start talking about Arista Validated Design, which is not something we've covered on this particular webinar, but it's a webinar for a future date, and how you can use Ansible and playbooks to configure CDP, CloudVision, and then use that to configure your switches. So there's a lot of expandability that we go through within the training program.
Okay, well, back to you, Eden.
All right, thank you guys so much for this presentation. I really appreciate your time today. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming, and we appreciate your time today too. And hope you have a good rest of your day.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.